Welcome to I Feel Fat Today. I'm your host, Kelly Taylor. Thank you so much for joining me. Really exciting episode this week. Please subscribe to us on YouTube where there are full video episodes. Please like, comment, subscribe, do all those things there. And then head over to Apple Podcasts to leave us a 5-star review. That is super helpful, helps get the word out there to potential new listeners. There has been some reviews as of lately left on the podcast that are really positive and personally for me a little bit uplifting. So I really appreciate that. If you leave a review, I will highlight it on the Instagram, the I Feel Fat Today Instagram. And if you leave a review and you want to send me a message about it, just let me know and I'll send you some stickers because I'm in the process of sourcing where I can get some stickers and other merch, but not really merch because I'm not selling anything yet for that I can send out to you, that I'd be happy to send out to you so that you can rep I Feel Fat Today, maybe like on your laptop case or on your water bottle. And I can send you a few so that when you lose your water bottle, you have fresh ones to put on the new water bottle that, you know, you'll have until you lose that one again. Am I just describing my own habits? I'm projecting. Okay. Yes. So subscribe on YouTube, leave a 5-star review, and follow us on social media where you can message me. You can follow the podcast at I Feel Fat Today, where we post clips of the episodes and updates on when episodes will be out and, you know, funny memes and things like that. And then you can also follow me, your host, Kelly Taylor, at Hello, This is Kelly, where I, you know, post my life and post stand-up clips when I do that. Yeah. Okay. So I'm really, really excited to get started with our guest this week. But before that, I want to give you guys a little low-cal sweet treat of the week. And this week's low-cal sweet treat of the week goes to the show Couples Therapy on Showtime. I'm watching it through the Paramount app. It is so good, guys. I cannot recommend this show enough. I'm somebody that's really into therapy. Like, I just have an interest in different healing modalities. And I feel like through therapy is where I'm able to find growth as a person. And I just find it very, very interesting, therapy in general. So the show Couples Therapy is great because you really get to see the work that the therapist is doing. It's just one therapist. Her name is Orna, and she's based in New York City, and she helps different couples work through the various issues. You know, everybody kind of comes to the table with different problems individually and together as a couple. And there's 4 seasons right now of couples therapy, and I just cannot recommend it enough. It's been around for a while, so you do kind of have to get through the COVID section, which you could just skip over entirely if like you're not into anything regarding COVID. But I still found that as I went back and watched in the year 2024, I still found that to be really interesting because remembering that we ever lived like that in quarantine is like so bizarre. And so it was really fun to see, and just like how challenging it was for couples to get through that. Not something I can relate to. I had a roommate at the time, and I feel like we fared pretty well during quarantine. But I'm getting off track. Yeah, check out the show Couples Therapy. I also highly recommend, if you want your partner to get into individual therapy or into couples therapy, have it on in the background. And I find it funny for myself having my boyfriend sort of give his commentary on the couples when it's on, because he won't sit and watch it with me. But you know, it's kind of like if I have it on, he can't help but watch it and give his 2 cents. And I find it funny when that happens. Okay, yeah, so that's the low-cal sweet treat of the week. And that's really all I got right now. I don't have an article or anything, but hopefully next week probably definitely next week. I'll have more of like a full-fledged intro for you. But we're getting into it with our guest this week. We have a really great conversation about intuitive eating, listening to your body's just natural cues when it comes to eating food and exercise. So, please welcome to the show, certified personal trainer and certified intuitive eating counselor from No Longer Dieting, Rachel Bass. So, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good, and thank you for having me.
Yes, yes. So I'm really excited to have you on because Rachel is a certified intuitive eating counselor. So I don't know if any of my listeners even knows what that is. So I would love for you to let us know, what is a certified intuitive eating counselor?
Yeah. So basically, what I do is I help people relearn how to listen to their bodily cues, like honoring your hunger, feeling your fullness. And ultimately, the goal is to be able to eat whatever you want, whenever you want, so long as the things you're eating leave you feeling physically, mentally, and emotionally pleasant. And so the intuitive eating program is based off of 10 principles. It's an evidence based practice. And what I do is guide people through the 10 principles. And on that journey, we also work on body image and relationship to exercise.
Oh, great. Okay, awesome. How did you get into this line of work?
Yeah, great question. So it was 2020, uh, prime COVID era, and I
Yep.
was just learning about TikTok and I was scrolling and I saw this girl talking about intuitive eating. She was an intuitive eating counselor. Her name's Sammy. And she has a company called Find Food Freedom. Everything she was saying, I was connecting on. I was like, I don't want to be dieting anymore. She was making fun of diets. And I just was like connecting to what she said. And I just decided to like invest in myself and go through her group coaching program. And as soon as I started learning about intuitive eating and like the anti diet culture movement, I was like, I'm connected to this. And I just like knew that I wanted to help other women also break free from the diet culture mentality. And what I mean by that is like the obsession with needing to be thin. So it was kind of like a little bit of an easy pivot for me because I come from a background of being a personal trainer. But the funny thing is that I became a personal trainer as like my side job to my acting career. And
Oh, okay.
moving to the city in 2007, so a long time ago, I wanted to do soap opera acting and I was really insecure about not being like a size 2, size 4. And so I thought becoming a personal trainer would like make me thinner and then therefore I would be more easily cast in roles. So like
Right.
that's kind of how I got into personal training and then how all this made sense too.
Totally. And I so relate to you on getting into a field to sort of feed this unhealthy obsession.
Yeah.
I ended up graduating from college with a degree in fashion, but I went into school studying nutrition
Okay. Yeah.
to be, because I was
Yes.
obsessed with food. I was obsessed with my eating disorder, and it was all just a guise to kind of feed that monster a little bit more. And I did not realize it at the time. I didn't even realize it when I switched my major into what I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I, had gone through some therapy where I realized that's why I did that.
Yeah. I mean, it all can be
Totally.
like very sneaky. The whole diet
Yeah.
culture mentality is so woven into our being. We learn it from such a young age. It's like in schools, it's in the doctor's office, it's certainly in pop culture. So it's
Yeah.
definitely like deeply rooted.
Absolutely. So, yeah, so this whole thing of intuitive eating, I feel like intuitive eating has been around, but it's new to me, it's new to society, and it's definitely new to like what people it's kind of like the word manifesting or grounding. It's like we weren't using those terms 10 years ago, and I definitely wasn't hearing anything about intuitive eating 10 years ago. So I find that very interesting. And I wonder, is this work science backed? Like, where did this come from kind of
Totally.
thing?
Yes. Okay. So the intuitive eating program was created like in the 90s. I think in 1995, the original intuitive eating book came out. It was written by Evelyn Tribbley and Elise Resch, who were two dietitians. So they used a lot of research and evidence to create the 10 principles of the intuitive eating program. So it has been around for decades, but I think why it's getting a lot of more notoriety right now is because of social media and
Yeah.
because of things like TikTok, we're able to spread that message. So you are correct. It has been around and it like has not been heard of necessarily unless people like I guess saw the book. Um, but now here we are.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, because of social media, the word about anything can get out faster. And so dieting is a $70 billion industry. And I have never in my life once done a diet that has stuck with me. And it's been something that I've been able to do for the rest of my life. And I've been able to maintain weight loss. I remarked this maybe last episode or a few episodes ago when I was chatting with one of my guests about just the relentlessness of dieting. And I kind of described it as like when I'm hitting a diet hard and I'm getting the results that I want, I have like 3 good months where
Yes.
I feel like I see the results
Yeah.
and then I don't know what happens. It just like it leaves me. I don't know. I don't know. And so why do you think diets don't have this lasting effect?
Yeah, well, I think they go against like our actual like body's needs. A lot of diets end up being they take away like either a whole food source, right? Like no carbs,
Right.
no dairy, no fat, or it's like very restricted in how many calories you're taking in. So the this is an interesting little tidbit. 1,200 calories, which like a lot of diets tend to be, even like something like Weight Watchers, which isn't specifically saying calories, but like when you add up how much you're eating in the day, probably around 12 to 1,500 calories. 1,200 calories is the recommended amount of calories for a toddler. So when an adult woman or man is consuming that amount, at a certain point your brain is like this is not enough food. So
Mm,
it releases more chemicals that make you more hungry. It's actually trying to save you evolutionarily to be able to survive. So we think, and diet culture and diets tell us you have no self-control, but really your brain released certain chemicals that alerted you to be more hungry and to feel less full until you eat more as a way to survive. So your body's actually trying to keep you alive. Um,
right.
but like again, the diet culture narrative does such a good job of being like, it's your fault. You
Right.
failed. You better pay to start a new diet.
Yeah, and that's really what it is. Like there's always this like buy-in cost because I remember when keto beat was really big in like 2016.
Yeah.
I remember throwing all of the unhealthy food out of my freezer in my fridge and I like got rid of everything. So even though I wasn't buying into a program, I
Yeah.
still had the cost of like getting rid of all those groceries, going out and buying fresh. And then I was eating bacon and cheese thinking that that is like, going to sustain me.
Well, and the
So,
other thing is that in the name of weight loss, we're told that we are now making healthy choices. But when you do something like keto or like back in the day Atkins, and you're not eating fruits and vegetables, you're not getting in those types of nutrients, fiber and vitamins and minerals. It's like that's not actually the epitome of health. But
right.
again, we have been conditioned to believe that if you are losing weight, that is what's making you healthy. And that's really proven to not be true.
Yeah, skinny equals healthy, fat equals unhealthy. And
Right.
we actually were kind of DMing about this, not to go off track, but we were DMing about this when we were discussing that Kelly Clarkson interview, the Kelly Clarkson show. She made a comment about because Clarkson, I feel like I blinked and she was thin again, all of a sudden. And she was having a discussion with, I believe, was it Whoopi Goldberg? Am I crazy?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I was like, make sure I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
And she had said something to the effect of, I looked at a photo of myself when I was heavier and I was days away from a heart attack.
Yeah.
And I just thought that is such a harmful narrative to be putting out there.
Exactly. This is why I create content, because I feel like I'm trying to change the narrative of what we have been indoctrinated to believe. And that whole idea that fat equals unhealthy is a huge misnomer. And it's not to say that people can't be fat and unhealthy, but like people can be thin and unhealthy, and we never stigmatize them that way. So like stigmatization is a huge problem, and it's like something in society that's very accepted, right? Like we know in society, at least like as New Yorkers, right, that like you shouldn't be racist and you shouldn't be homophobic and you shouldn't be sexist, but being fat phobic is totally still acceptable. And so
Yep.
like this is really something I'm trying to combat.
Totally. Yeah. It's almost like you putting that content out there is like the same thing of when it comes to positive affirmations. If you say one mean thing to yourself, you have to say 10 positive things. It's like for every one bad Kelly Clarkson interview that's out there, you have to put out like 10 TikToks about how diet culture is just like not meant to be there to help us.
Yeah, correct. You're so right.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm curious, being that you work in this industry now, when was the concept of dieting first introduced to you?
So, growing up, I just like never was thin like my friends. I didn't live in like an exceptionally large body for a child, but I just wasn't built like my friends. And I remember being 8 years old and wearing shorts to the pool. Like that's like my oldest memory of like thinking this is not a good enough body. My
Right.
parents never said anything about my body. It wasn't anything like that, but my mom dieted. So like that's what I saw. It's like, oh, my mom diets. And so we didn't have things in the house like ice cream, we'd had frozen yogurt. We didn't have cake, we had angel food cake. So there was like
Right.
little substitutions that like, they just get internalized as a child of like the moralization of food, right? Some things are good, some things are bad. And I don't think I probably, well, that's not true actually. I was going to say probably not until college, but no, in high school is probably when I started my path down a disordered eating path of, just like, oh, I won't eat today. That'll be
Right.
good. If I don't eat today, like I'm going to win here. So, and like I would say, like exploring into unhealthy habits, we'll just put it that way.
Right. Right. And you said that you started your career as an actress. So were you involved in like theater and dance and that kind of thing when you were younger?
Yeah, totally. I mean, just mostly through like camp and school. But when I went
Right.
to college, then I was a theater major. And so it started like, then I went on Weight Watchers, and you're in college and you're away from your parents for the first time. And I definitely put on weight freshman year. And by senior year, I was like going to Weight Watchers meetings with my best friend, drinking like SoCo 150 so that I could have like the highest proof alcohol, with Diet Coke for the least
Yep.
amount of calories and the least amount of points. And it's just like the ups and downs and the total yo-yo dieting that we all
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, I feel like college for me was just a collection of me not eating enough throughout the day so that I had enough, like I banked enough calories for my alcohol consumption, and then doing a crash diet to prepare for like a social event coming up. Like I remember every Halloween was like crash diet time. And I very much relate to you with, even though I think I always felt I was fat, I was by no means fat for my age or anything like that when I was younger in high school, but I was built different. I was built unlike the other girls who just seemed like they just had smaller frames.
And you had no, assuming you were like me, no representation to think that your body is a fine, beautiful body, right?
No.
Because what you're seeing on TV and in magazines is the thin ideal, is the thin representation. And if there was once in a while a fat character for someone to see, like then that person was made fun of for being fat.
Right.
It's like, to me, growing up watching Friends, it's like the flashbacks to Monica being fat. And then
Yes.
that's like that's like representation, I guess.
Yep.
But like, so I mean, there was just nothing to look up to. You just have everyone talk, and even your thin friends want to be thinner, right? Like,
Yeah.
because even as adults, like thin people don't like their body either.
Yeah.
So we're all consumed with this idea of perfection, that like the bar is always moved, right? Like that's how the money keeps a coming in the industry. It's like they're always just going to change what's in style, what type of body. And I don't know if you or anyone listening has ever seen those like reflecting back on the decades of like how women's bodies, like what's in style in
Yeah.
different like, you had heroin chic, and then like the Kardashians entered the picture, and you like big booties and like hourglass, and then whatever, it keeps changing. So we can never
Absolutely.
achieve it.
I know. I mean, when I was in middle school, high school, all over tabloids was Jumbo Jessica,
Oh,
you know,
Jessica Simpson,
Jessica Simpson, just in a normal ass body.
which
She,
honestly, if you saw her in person, she was probably super petite. She just was like
right,
so busty. Like she probably was like a size 4.
right. And yeah, it's crazy. So,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So, you had a mom that dieted, and that makes sense. And I feel like that's like an extremely common thing
Yeah.
where it's like, I don't know how old you are, but I feel like anybody that's, of a certain generation, always, I had moms and grandmas that were dieting in the house. And so it wasn't
Oh
even
yeah.
like a situation where, you would necessarily be meant to be, sorry, made to be, feel bad about how you look, but you see it in pop culture, and
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, I kind of have the blueprint set forth of like how to get into this by going to a Weight Watchers meeting or
Yep. Totally.
definitely. Okay, yeah. So the whole thing with intuitive eating is and something that I myself am struggling with is I want to break free from diets. I It's not sustainable for me. It's not sustainable. Period, end of
Correct.
sentence. Not necessarily just for me. And
Correct.
so it's like I'm interested in intuitive eating, and I actually just read the book Women, Food, and God by Janine Roth, which I don't know if you're familiar at all with
I'm
her
not.
work, but oh, it's so good. I'll send you a link to check out the book. It's really good, and it that book really helped me with connecting to the emotional aspect of eating, um, and how so much of eating can be emotional, and that really is something that can lead to weight gain. And so when I look at, like, what advice would you give someone that's interested in intuitive eating, but they also are interested in weight loss?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll say that I've never worked with a client who came to me for intuitive eating counseling who didn't want to lose weight. And I
Okay.
also didn't enter into the program like without wanting to lose weight. So this is like we're coming from diet culture. So you're coming from that mentality. My question would be like, what do you want to lose weight for? Because if someone says for my health, I would say, well, we can pursue your health without intentional weight loss. And so what people may not know is in the intuitive eating program, it's the goal is not weight loss. It doesn't mean that weight loss might not happen. But it's not the goal. And until you give up that goal, you can't really succeed in the program because if you're constantly thinking, oh, should I have had that? Oh, that was a bad food. That's junk food. And for people listening, not seeing me, I'm like putting this in quotes. When we demonize how we talk about food, it changes how we feel about it. So, in order to really like surrender to this process, we have to work through the feeling of wanting to lose weight. And I always say to people, like, those thoughts, like 4 years into my personal journey, they still come in. It's what I do with them, right? Like that thought might come in, and then I'm able to kind of be like, oh, okay, that was a thought and move on with my day. It's not because weight loss is bad or weight loss has to be good. It's just, it takes you away from the ability to listen to your bodily cues. Because let's say you're thinking of like intermittent fasting, right? And you can't eat until noon. But if you wake up and you're hungry, but that's not the time of day when you're allowed to eat, then you go against your bodily cues to like obey the rules of the diet. So that's why we don't that's why we say you kind of have to give up on that goal. And in order to bridge that gap of your question, it's like you really have to decide on like how do you want to be living? Because it's okay to desire weight loss, but going through this journey, it's just like not what we're going to be focusing on. And as people continue through all 10 principles and they start like really hearing, the book is just so interesting, and like it's not like a boring science read. It's like people usually feel like really seen as they go through the intuitive eating book and the journey, and you start understanding why you kind of have to let go of this goal of weight loss.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even as you were speaking, I just had this thought of, how do you give up the goal? It's so hard. It's so ingrained. It's so honestly in my body that
yeah.
having to give up the goal is so hard, but it's almost like you don't have to necessarily give up the goal to pursue intuitive eating. It's almost like the process of intuitive eating helps you give up the goal. Am I getting it
Correct.
right?
Yes, you are. The first principle of the intuitive eating program is reject the diet mentality.
Okay.
So as you start like reading what Evelyn and Elise have to say, you're like, oh, okay, I understand. Kind of like the example I gave. I understand that these diets take me away from my ability to listen to my bodily cues. And if I want to be honoring my body and my needs, then I have to let go of these rules. Now, there are things that intuitive eaters can't eat for individuals. Like I am allergic to mangoes. So, as an intuitive eater, I'm not going to eat mangoes because my lips swell up and like
Right.
I might not be able to breathe.
Right.
So, anyone can go through the intuitive eating program. You can have diabetes, you can have high cholesterol, because going back to what I said earlier, we want to be at a place where the things you eat leave you feeling mentally, physically, and emotionally pleasant. And on your journey, you're going to eat things and be like, that does not feel, I feel like not good mentally about what I just did. I just sat down with an entire pizza and I ate 4 pieces and I feel overly full and uncomfortable. And now I'm mad at myself. And so what we do in the process is we say like, okay, well, this is an opportunity to be curious. Why did you choose to eat 4, 5, 6 slices today? Is something bothering you? Are we using food as a coping mechanism? Are we trying to numb out and we're turning to food to like not think about or feel other things in life? And that's okay. And when we can recognize why we use food, all of a sudden the need to use it goes away.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you were talking, I was thinking about how I feel like people don't even really know how food makes them feel. They
Right.
kind of will maybe eat a pizza and then instead of recognizing that they're feeling bad after doing that, they don't necessarily say, I ate a pizza. I feel bad now. It's, I ate a pizza. I'm a piece of garbage.
Yeah.
I'm a bad
Shame.
person. I
Yeah.
did a
Guilt.
bad thing.
Yeah.
And then, or maybe they don't even have those thoughts. They just go into acting out. Maybe they're like rude to their partner or just
Yeah.
depressed. Like it kind of like shoots off into all these other channels
Yes.
because they're not exploring how what they just put into their body is actually making them feel, which is difficult, I think, for a majority of the population.
Oh, of course, because it's not how we're taught, right? I mean, it's like if you are hanging out with a little kid, they're probably more in tune with their body than an adult because they might just be like, I don't like that. I don't want like anything that they might have in their mind is like a learned experience, right? So like a kid is more likely to be like to know when they're full or
Yeah.
to know when they're hungry. It's like if they are eating past a point of comfortable fullness, it might come from more of a learned experience, like a parent not giving them enough food because they're like, that's too much. And then later on, there's like hoarding or binging or overeating privately, sneaking up when your parents are asleep because you were told no. So this is why I say we have to go back to learning to understand our unique individual body. And if you have something, because people have a hard time understanding how, like, if they have diabetes, let's say, like, how can you go through the intuitive eating program? No, I'm not the intuitive eating counselor to work through that with this person, but
Right.
I know that they can because if they're eating a huge bag of candy, I'm going to guess that that doesn't feel good in their body because of how sugar works in their body. So that then isn't the answer, right? Like I think sometimes when people have heard of intuitive eating and they hear these lines where we're like, you can eat whatever you want, whenever you want. People are like, oh, well, then I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to eat junk food. I put that in quotes all day long. But what people don't understand is when you give yourself, and this is a process, unconditional permission to eat whatever you want, you don't binge eat on those foods because you can eat it later. Once you're at a
Right.
comfortable fullness, you're like, oh, and it's an amazing feeling as a dieter to get an ice cream and eat it. And a few bites in, halfway through, whatever it is, say, I am satisfied and I'm going to put this in the freezer. I'm done with this, because we feel so out of control from diet culture. Because in diet culture, it's like you can have 2 tablespoons or you can measure out half a cup and you need to track that and you have to feel a certain way about it. So learning that you will innately stop when you feel how things are in your body and when you know that you have permission to have it tomorrow, it's like life changing to people who have experienced dieting all the time. And that's how I feel. That's why I'm so passionate about it, because I'm like, I promise you, you won't sit there eating pizza all day, every single day. You
Right.
might in the beginning of your journey with foods that you really don't have a great relationship with. Like for me, it was pasta and rice. Like I ate pasta every single day for a week until all of a sudden it like lost its luster. And
Right.
I explain it to people also, like if you're anyone who's ever traveled, like I've been to Southeast Asia, and in Southeast Asia, it's a lot of noodles, a lot of rice, a lot of broth, or at least that's what I was choosing to eat. And
Right.
after 2 weeks, I could not wait to get back to New York City and have a sweet green salad. Like, please
Yeah.
give me some vegetables, like with balsamic. Like when you only eat certain things, you do crave other things. And so that's why when you go through the journey, you get to this place of like, oh, I can trust myself to eat nutrient dense foods. And it is okay if I eat things that are less nutrient dense. Like everything's going to be okay. And I've started talking about it as like your personal moderation, because in diets, that's what we're told. Well, at a certain point, it's like you can eat anything you want, just in moderation. But until you have a sense of what moderation is to you, you either aren't going to bring the Oreos home because you don't trust yourself around the Oreos, or you bring them home and you eat it in 2 days because you're like, I
Right.
better get it out of the house
Right.
before, like, I need to just start fresh tomorrow. So I'm just going to eat all of these right now, binge, and like tomorrow we'll start fresh.
Yeah, the whole start fresh thing is like it feels rooted in this puritanical, like I stepped out of line.
Yeah.
So I have to start fresh so that like I wash the slate clean kind of
Diet
thing.
starts tomorrow.
Diet starts tomorrow. Absolutely. I mean, ugh, I know that well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think diets oversimplify the emotional. Diets don't even connect to the emotional aspect of eating because diets for me, okay, food, if I'm I always was envious of the person that was like, "Oh, I'm too nervous to eat." I'm like, "I'm nervous. I need to eat." Like I am nervous right now. Like I'm like nervously noshing on something. And so there's that aspect of like the emotional part of eating, of like how our actual emotions cause us to act around food. But then there's also the whole thing of um if I notice for myself, if I have a scarcity mindset and I have leftovers from a restaurant, it feels like I have to eat those leftovers before they go bad because then that's money that I've now wasted. And that's the other aspect to it, is just like this like if you grew up in a clean your plate kind of family, it's like, well, I feel like I need to finish it because if I waste it, I'm going to feel bad about that. So it's like I feel bad if I eat it, I feel bad if I throw it out.
Exactly. And this is why like working with a counselor can be really helpful to kind of dive deeper into like the history, cuz there is the intuitive eating book and there's also the intuitive eating workbook, and they are both like fantastic tools. But sometimes it's hard to convince yourself to keep with the program,
Right.
and also it's hard to kind of dive deep and remember that like when you were 15, you heard your grandma call you fat, or like whatever these little triggers are that affect us. And so that's part of like what I do is help people kind of like really understand how they got to this point, and then like where they want to be and how to like relearn how to honor your cues. Because if someone's coming out of an eating disorder, they don't even have those bodily cues, right? you
Right.
you might not even understand when you're hungry and when you're full. So sometimes we have to relearn even like what is a proper fullness. Like, when am I actually hungry? If someone hasn't eaten breakfast in 25 years, then they're not going to wake up hungry. But that doesn't mean that their body couldn't use food in the morning.
Right.
So that's part of the process too, in order to be at this place. Because oftentimes, if you are someone who skips a meal, then you eat more later. And again, that's a biological cue. It's trying to make up for it. It thinks our brains still think we are like, there's no grocery store, right? So if like the biology of it is thinking, oh, famine, then if there's an opportunity to eat, that's sometimes why we eat faster, or like we don't even understand that we are ravenous because we've just gotten so used to that feeling. But when we're ravenous, that's when we grab for things that are faster, less nutrient dense. We eat faster, so we don't even feel that physical cue of fullness until we are overly full and we're unbuttoning the pants. And this isn't to say that like that's a bad thing. Like if you're going out to dinner and it's a special event and it's a really good meal and you have to unbutton your pants, like that still doesn't make you a bad person. But
Right.
when you go through the program, you realize like this was a special event and I was like, I needed to eat the food while it was hot. Like it wasn't going to be the
Right.
same in leftover form. So all these like little things that we've lived through in diet culture that we have certain diet culture feelings on, we have to recognize them and then relearn them from a more intuitive place.
Right. Yeah. And maybe this is a little out of your scope, so don't feel like you have to
Okay.
answer, but I'm as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about how ADHD, something like ADHD plays into this
Yeah,
because like how that would affect hunger cues and your cue to do anything.
for sure. And I get a lot of questions on TikTok specifically about that. And I always want to refer them to so intuitive eating counselors can have different backgrounds. A lot of them are dietitians. My background is as a personal trainer. So I would want someone to go to intuitive eating dietitian who also understand or a therapist, someone who understands ADHD because they're going
Right.
to be able to recognize like what comes with ADHD and then how the intuitive eating program like can be helpful. But like how to help in that way. So it is a little out of my scope, I guess is the moral
No,
of what I'm saying.
no, but but I'm glad we're talking about this because I feel like if, you're a listener and you're thinking, well, I have ADHD, I have a hard time connecting to my cues for whatever, whatever the case may be, sort of like insert ailment here, you know, how there are counselors out there that can help you with,
Definitely.
whatever, like you
I can
said,
even think of one in my head. I
diabetes.
know of someone who I believe like
Yeah,
she personally has ADHD and her background is as like I don't think she's a therapist, but more in that like counseling sense. And then she's an intuitive eating counselor. So definitely like there are intuitive eating counselors to help with all individual needs, I would say.
right,
And you do also want to make sure that someone is a certified intuitive eating counselor because what's happened is intuitive eating is getting a little bit more notoriety through social media. So now there are people popping up on things like TikTok who call themselves like an intuitive eating coach. They're not certified as an intuitive eating counselor, and they are telling you that you will lose weight when you do their program, which is about like their whatever they're claiming is intuitive. But it's like, it's very, they're co opting our
right.
language to sell their diet,
Yeah.
which ultimately is going to have someone end up, as we were saying earlier, like 3 months later, gaining back the weight that they lost and then feeling guilt and shame and like it's their fault.
Right. It's just diet culture rearing its ugly head.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I remember that being a thing in college for the semester. I was on track to become a dietitian. I had many professors who were dietitians who said something that they're finding, this is like 2010, is people will say that they're nutritionists and try to do the work of dietitians, but it's not the same thing. And this is kind of sounds like what you're saying. Is the
Correct.
same for intuitive eating counselors, certified intuitive eating counselors.
Yeah, and honestly, people should be cautious of working with nutritional coaches and health
Yeah.
coaches because, or even personal trainers giving you meal plans. It's apparently it's not even legal. Like people do it all the time. I don't know why it like flies under the radar, but unless someone is a dietitian, they are not actually like legally allowed to give you a meal plan and be
Yeah.
telling you because dietitians go through many years of extra schooling. But technically, as when I went to a 6 month program to become a personal trainer, we were taught about nutrition and we were told that we could tell people like how to eat, what to eat, but like
Right.
not really. Like, so be very
Right.
wary of people selling you their program, although it may give you certain results. But it's like, what does that mean for long term lasting effects? So,
Right.
diets work in the sense of a quick moment of weight loss, probably at least 5, 10, 15 pounds. We've all done them, but like that comes back quickly. And the statistics are that 95% of people who go on a diet for intentional weight loss will gain the weight back, 95%. And 2/3 of those people will gain back more weight than they lost. And so
Mm.
now we're getting into the weight cycling.
Yeah.
And I mean, we could go down so many different paths. Like this is also when we talk about uh oh, well, I'm blanking on it right now. So
Uh,
the like
uh,
term is flying out of my head.
in terms of yo-yo dieting.
In terms of uh gaining weight, like
Right.
I have a
Rebound.
yeah, but oh my gosh, I'm just like forgetting a whole term right now. It'll come
It'll come. It'll come.
to me.
Um, well, actually, as we're talking, I would love to talk to you about Ozempic and
Yeah,
other drugs like Ozempic. Now,
yeah,
from my TikTok research,
yeah,
from my TikTok research, the biggest take, and also I'll say it, friends that I have that are have been on some form of
a
GLP-1.
GLP-1. Yeah,
Exactly. Yep. The biggest thing that they've noticed is, besides not, having the desire to eat, is their food noise has ceased.
yes,
So
yes,
food noise is one of those things where I feel like, if somebody is like hard in the camp of like, yes, Ozempic, GLP-1s, semaglutide, this is good for us, food noise. It's like I have the disease of obesity, and food noise is in my head, and I can't get out. I can't not have it unless I have Ozempic or whatever.
yeah,
I'm curious. Food noise kind of sounds like everything we just discussed about how we feel emotionally around eating.
yeah. I mean, I first want to just say that some people like need a GLP-1, and those
Okay.
people should be on it for their whole life, just like people who take cholesterol medicine for their whole life or um, blood pressure medicine, right? There are
Right.
medicines that people do take forever. And so there are people who should be on these medications.
And are those people with diabetes, or is there people outside of that?
I think it can also be people with PCOS. Um,
Okay. Okay. Okay.
I mean,
I mean, not in I know that you're like, it's not that we're just having a discussion. You're not
yeah,
like a medical doctor, but like I am
right.
curious because you would
I
know
think
more
that
about
like
this
there
than
are
me.
people who say that obesity is a disease. There are people say
Right.
that obesity isn't a disease. I don't want to like claim either one, but if a doctor in these situations, if that's helpful tool to someone and they're going to be on it forever, then like that's great. I
Right.
think when I create content talking about GLP-1s and food noise, I'm really meaning to get into the heads of people who want to lose, 30 pounds, 20 pounds,
Right. Hmm.
and who have dieted, as opposed to someone who has also probably been offered weight loss surgery, which is also
Right.
a whole thing we could talk about. But so, yes, food noise is something that you can get rid of without going on a GLP-1. And I think that what doesn't get discussed is like if you take something like Ozempic, which I think most people have go for a year, maybe a year and a half, depending on if they can afford it. In that time, you have a chemical in you that now has apparently erased your desire to eat. You don't think about food anymore. And people are like, great, I'm not haunted by these thoughts. But
Right.
what happens when you go off the medication? And the reason I come from a place of having worked with clients who have been on these medications and they went off of them and the food noise returned. So the idea that all of a sudden you can just have these healthy habits, it's like, but you weren't hungry. You had a chemical in your body telling you, like, no, I don't like have hunger. And then when you go off of it, I have heard people say that the hunger is blinding, that you're so hungry. Because also, if you're not hungry and you're not eating, and we're going back to like, 1,200 calories or something a day, yes, your brain is like, I haven't been eating enough. So there are people, all of the clients who come to me, who regain all the weight they lost. So it was just basically another diet because
Right.
you didn't learn how to have a good relationship with food. You had a chemical in your brain that helped you not think about food. But if you're not going to be on it forever, from the people I've worked with, they say it comes back. If there are people out there who have been on it and that's not their experience, and that's great, but that doesn't mean that the people don't exist and that we can predict who, potentially might have their food noise come back. And in addition to that, it's like these are kind of new. So I think in 2 years, we could be having a very different conversation when thousands of people have now gone through the experience of being on it and going off. And
Right.
whether you go off of it because you don't want to pay for it anymore or you can't get the prescription for it, like most of the people who are on it for these like aesthetic purposes are going to go off of it eventually. And maybe
Right.
the, I don't know, maybe they gain the weight back and they go back on it. I mean, everyone has body autonomy and can do whatever they want. But it's like if your goal is to be like living an authentic, free life, and also like maybe you enjoy eating. Like personally, I like eating. I live in New York City. Food's amazing. So it would kind of suck to like go out to dinner and have zero desire to eat the food.
Yeah. Oh, I feel you there. Absolutely. Part of my I have a group of friends from home that we say like food is our thing. Like whenever we get together, it's like let's go out to eat. Like it's our the way this sounds a little heavy in saying this, but it's kind of the way we show love for each other by going out and sharing a meal where we just pick a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, but I don't think that's heavy. Like that's culture too.
Right.
Right? Like we learn about other people's cultures by experiencing their food. We show love. When someone dies, you show up with food, right? Like if there's a celebration, you
Yes.
show up with food. So food is part of culture. And this idea that we should like fear it or not have it is absurd. But that is part of diet culture, right? It's part of what we consume in our day to day. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
don't enjoy food. Like you're a better person if you don't enjoy food. But the
Right.
sorry, I have to say this one tangent. It's like in the era of social media though, if you have a thin influencer who's a foodie and goes out to eat all the time, then it's cool. And they're telling you
Yeah.
all the best restaurants and they travel the world or whatever. But if it was a fat person doing it, it's like, hey, internet trolls are like, hey, you fat pig, stop, put the spoon down. So it's
Yeah.
like one of the things that I'm trying to educate people on are again is like weight stigma because like we can't tell someone's health. And again, the thin person was eating. I mean, there's so many influencers I can think of online who are in thin bodies and eat all this food for their content, and they're thin people. Like some bodies are different and
Yeah.
bodies change, and some people just are thinner and some people are fatter. So it's just
Yeah.
trying to get the masses to understand that.
Right. And to that end, if there is the thin influencer, travel blogger, food blogger person, they also have the comments of people being like, there's no way you ate that. You took a bite on camera and then you didn't eat the rest. And maybe that is happening, but they're also the ones that are dealing with weight stigma in a way by trolling, by dealing with those troll comments. And so
Sure.
I think people maybe look at body positivity or body neutrality as a fat person issue, but it's
Mhm.
an every person issue. And
Yeah.
that's something with this podcast that I try to have be the conversation because I feel like society or haters really have co-opted body neutrality and body positivity as just, oh, you don't care that you're going to be morbidly obese and ruin your life in the name of body positivity. And it's like, no, you've missed the point entirely. I'm just trying to
Sure.
not be obsessed with my diet.
Totally. And body positivity really did start in a very different place. Like this is something
Yes.
that started with fat, black, disabled bodies,
Yep.
like marginalized bodies. And then social media also has taken it to this place where the person with like the tiny little belly roll, which I'm saying actually that's very rude of me because that is a
No,
thing. People can connect to it, but it
yes,
is
but I feel
different than
you.
where the movement began. So
Yes, yes. No, that was the perfect example of where it started to where it went. And sorry, like, yes, I totally empathize a little, this is my uterus. I totally empathize with the person that,
right,
is,
right,
is, you know, feeling that and needing body positivity for that. But that is nowhere near where it started. And maybe
exactly.
if people remember that a little bit more, we could kind of like get further with the movement.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, diet culture in pop culture, it's just constantly being forced down our throat.
Yeah.
And now I want to talk to you a little bit about BMI,
Okay.
body mass index.
Yeah.
So the BMI scale has plagued me my entire life. Not okay, up until recently.
Yeah.
Because as we talk about, like, even just going back to our initial conversation of what you said, like, oh, I wasn't fat, I was just bigger than the other girls around me, or like, my peers. I
Mhm.
think part of the reason why I felt like I was so fat was because of the damn BMI scale. It
Sure.
always had me at either overweight, obese, or the one after it,
Morbidly obese.
mortally obese. And
Yeah.
it's like, I looked in the mirror, and even with my body dysmorphia, I didn't see that, but I had like a medical document telling me that. And I know, because of this podcast and the research that I've done, that the BMI is actually rooted in racism,
Yeah.
and that it's, I think, based off of like the European man.
Yes. It was a Belgian mathematician in like
Right.
the 1870s who created it, never with the intention of it being used to like for doctors' offices. It was like, yeah, I don't want to tell people the wrong thing. It's very easy Google, but
Yeah, yeah,
yes, it
that's
was
always
not
where I get
created to
stuck.
like determine people's health. And so this is why someone like The Rock is like morbidly obese because
Right.
the BMI does not take into consideration fat to muscle mass ratio. So it's just taking a number on a scale. But people who have a lot of muscle mass are usually, especially in diet culture, looked at as very healthy, active people. But muscle it weighs something. So like the idea that like a person like The Rock can be morbidly obese on the BMI scale proves how ridiculous this whole
Yeah.
concept is. Also, I don't remember the exact year, but like the 90s or the 2000s, they decided to like change the marker of what was going to be considered obese.
Right.
So like overnight, all these people, because they just decided to like change the numbers on the scale, all these people are obese. And so I don't even like using that word obese because I'm like, what does that mean? If we're using
Right.
it based off of a chart that we know is BS, like, can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, you can
Okay.
totally. Yeah.
So it's like total fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
Then, like, it, it's just very bothersome that there are medical professionals who still use that as like a great indicator of someone's health. That's absurd. Um, like, I don't even think people, I always tell people they don't need to be weighed at the doctor's office. You can just go in and say, I don't want to be weighed. And then if you get pushback and they're like, no, you have to be, you're like, you can just keep saying no. You have to advocate for yourself. No, I do not want to be weighed. The only reason someone needs to be weighed is if you're taking a medicine that, is being prescribed based on how much you weigh. But
Right.
they wouldn't know that at the beginning of the appointment, and they always do your weight at the beginning of the appointment. So I used to just turn around and be like, I don't want to know, because like if you are someone like me, you're triggered by the numbers on the scale, and that
Yep.
could really send you in a tizzy. So I used to turn around, but in this day and age, everything's online. So if you say like I don't want to know the number, and then you sign into your online portal, it's gonna be right there. So now I just tell people to decline it. So same thing with BMI. It's like, this is bullshit. No one should be trying to tell you that your health is being an indicator based on your BMI. And I think that again, this is where weight stigma comes in. I bet it's used a lot more with people in larger bodies. Or I mean, people can be underweight as well, but it's
Right.
just definitely used as a tool to be like, you're obese. It's like, but what does that word mean?
Yeah.
Right? I
Yeah,
think it's like people just
absolutely.
look at someone, they're like, that person's obese. It's more of like a cultural thought on what we think bodies should be and what health should be and what health looks like than an actual like scientific, you know,
Yeah.
ruling.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just unfortunate that BMI became something that is legitimately used in
Yeah.
healthcare. And I mean, this goes into more of societal issues of just, how insurance companies use
Yep.
BMI, and
Yes.
who benefits from BMI affecting if you qualify for procedures and medications more than an insurance company. It
Yeah.
makes sense that maybe an insurance company would want the majority of Americans to be obese so that they can, I don't know, qualify for something like bariatric surgery,
Yeah.
so that that's more money going into the insurance company's pockets. And it's
Totally.
really frustrating that ill educated people will throw BMI out there, not necessarily even just doctors, but
Sure.
just any, smart ass really that thinks that like, oh, well, medically BMI, you're obese, like you should
Right.
go on Ozempic, you should diet, do whatever you can do because this scale says you're putting yourself in an unhealthy state, which is
Right. But
just wholly
bro,
inaccurate.
if the gym bro who's super muscular was obese on the BMI, he would, like it wouldn't be thought of that way. Right. So
Right.
it's like they just kind of like let go of what doesn't work in that narrative. It's like, again,
Right.
we're really just judging people on how they look. And I
Yes.
think that the BMI is just kind of like added to using that. But I think one of the big like uphill parts of the anti-diet culture like movement and journey is that like is dealing with medical fat phobia and have
Yes.
doctors, right? So like I understand if someone's listening to this and they're like, but Rachel, you're not a doctor. Like facts. I'm not. You're right. But like I am speaking from a place of evidence-based research that has
Yeah.
been done for the principles of the intuitive eating program. Um, but it's very hard when doctors are still living in this like fat phobic lens of how they talk about things. Like even when it comes to like, oh, your knee hurts, well, you should probably lose weight, or you need to lose weight to have the knee replacement. Like I'm not saying that having less weight might feel differently in your body, but coming from like a personal training background and an intuitive eating background, I'd be like, okay, well, how can we be like moving and strengthening your knees? Again, not because weight loss is bad. I'm just talking about like if intentional weight loss we know you're going to regain, then why is that the answer? Right? I want people to be at a place where they're like intuitively able to trust themselves, which is what most of us in diet culture can't do. We don't feel like we can trust ourselves. So it's
Right.
like every time a diet is offered by a doctor, it's like, but this isn't going to have a long term lasting effect. Like, how many people can you think of right now who have been on a diet and kept off all the weight they lost on that diet? Like, I can't think of a single person.
Right. I can think of some I can think of somebody and they've been tortured with feeling of still not feeling like they've lost enough weight or just the fear of gaining it back and have been restrictive with their diets their whole life, just personally in my life, and it's not sustainable and it is all consuming to the day you die.
It takes a real mental toll on someone because
Yeah.
yeah, people can eat 1,200 calories a day or whatever. And again, like if that's what works for you, like you don't have to follow what I'm saying. But for people who that makes them more obsessed with food, thinking about food more, having the food noise, it's like, okay, well there is another way. And
Right.
also I just want to say really quickly, like when it comes to like weight loss surgery, I don't know the statistic behind it, but also people who lose a lot of weight with weight loss surgery, there's definitely a percentage who gain the weight back as well because they weren't taught about how to think and feel about food and how to honor their body. Instead, half of their organ has been cut off and they go through this restrictive phase where they can only eat so little. And over time, like their stomach can get bigger again and
Yeah.
then they can eat more food. Or I'm just throwing out different things that are coming to me now because there's just like so, it's like when someone's on Ozempic, it's like, well, maybe they're not hungry all day, but all they ate was McDonald's. Is that because they just had like one little happy meal all day long because they weren't hungry, but that's what they have access to every day? Is that like health promoting behaviors? It's like you might be losing weight, but like, is this sustainable? Is this like actually equaling health? And I also, lastly, just want to say that like, I don't think anyone needs to be pursuing health for another person because that's
Right.
another thing that we do in diet culture and in wellness culture, the idea of like, well, it's okay that you're fat as long as you're trying to be healthy, as long as you're trying to lose weight. It's like, no, you don't have to like pursue health for anyone. You don't
Yeah.
like that's I mean like maybe for like your closest loved ones, but like this idea is I think still like rooted behind fat phobia because the thin person who eats McDonald's every day all day long is not attacked in the same way because they are
Yep.
thin.
Yep. It's like you'll only accept a fat person if you see them on the pursuit
Yeah.
of thinness.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So time is flying by right
I know.
now. As we wind down, I would really love because it's the concept of working out to not lose weight
Yeah.
is so foreign to me.
Yeah.
Um even though I enjoy being active, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around. So I would love, just based on your background, if you could speak a little bit more about this quote need to work out
Yeah.
versus a desire to work out, and as a personal trainer, sort
Yeah.
of your place with that.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think our need, right? It comes with like, well, diet and exercise. This is what a healthy lifestyle is. And so and in the pursuit of weight loss, it's like, well, if you exercise, you might like, burn more calories, right? So you might
Right.
get to your goal faster. And then there's kind of like, oh, well, if you're building muscle and you're quote toning, which like isn't a real thing. It's like you can build muscle or you can lose fat, but there's just like all these terms that we like throw around in
They're
diet
not
culture.
real.
Yeah, exactly. They're like marketing. But ask me again. Sorry, I lost my train of
So
thought.
no, no, you're fine. So just as what with your work as a personal trainer,
Yeah,
how does the mindset
change.
change from need to desire
Yeah.
to work out?
Okay, yes. It's not easy. It's been actually the hardest part of my journey as a personal trainer. To not be at the gym thinking like I'm doing this right now and it's going to give me a result that's going to like shrink my body or make me like look better. But I think what happens is when we only work out to be changing our body, then sometimes some of us at least rebel, right? So it's like you might even have time in your day to get in 20 minutes to an hour of moving your body, but it's kind of like a teenager rebelling. It's like, well, I just don't want to. And I find power then in saying no. That is kind of like how I'm like, okay, I'm doing something for myself is by like rebelling and rejecting this thing that actually is good for us in so many ways. So I think that sometimes when we've only been working out as punishment, right? You have to earn your calories, you have to burn calories. Then it's like, okay, well, I don't want to punish myself. I don't feel like doing that. Or if you've only ever done like Barry's boot camp or had a trainer who yelled at you, you get this like kind of like, okay, I don't want to do it because it's punishment. So part of this journey is like, how do I like to move my body? And sometimes like just starting with like walking. I tell people like walking is great. Especially like not everyone lives in a city, so not everyone's like innately walking all day long. Um, and it's a process and a journey, but thinking like, how do I want to feel today can be a great question. Like, do I want to feel strong? If you have access to weights, then that might be a great time to be like weightlifting because that's how you want to feel. You want to feel strong. But if you want to feel like loose and limber, then maybe yoga is something that you're gonna, if you have access to. And if you want to feel like community, maybe taking a class. So I think that's a good place to start of like, how do I want to feel today? Because not every day
Yeah.
has to be the same thing. Now, I am coming from this background of working with people who would like want to lose weight. And then I shifted. I reference myself now as an anti diet personal trainer. So I don't work with clients who come to me saying they want to lose weight. I tell people all the time, like, you clearly didn't read the profile.
Right.
So I won't work with people for intentional weight loss. And again, this doesn't mean that like wanting to have a goal is bad. Like if you're like, hey, I want to deadlift 200 pounds, like that's amazing. If you want to be able to run a mile, these are great goals. So you can ask yourself, like, do you have a goal? Or just like, what do you enjoy? Like my husband and I were in New Hampshire dog sitting my parents' dog for 3 weeks, and we played pickleball every day. And like, I really enjoyed that. That was movement, an hour of pickleball a day. So finding what you like, what lights you up, what excites you, what feels good, it's definitely a journey. And it's like it's just not a shift that's going to happen overnight because I that like still comes into my mind. Like I'll go to the gym and I'll be like, okay, like is this going to change how my body looks, right? And again, it's
Right.
like what do I do with that thought?
Right.
Like can I kind of be like, okay, that was diet culture, like I'm doing this to feel strong, you know, is like a
Yeah.
little bit more productive in keeping me wanting to go. It's like every day I wanted to play pickleball. Not every day do I really want to go downstairs and lift weights, you know? So
Yeah.
it's part of the
Absolutely.
journey.
Yeah, and it's almost as if, I think the key takeaway for the listener should be, we shouldn't be demonizing the thoughts that we're having. And
Right.
so if the thought is, oh, I'm kind of hoping that the Stairmaster helps my butt change to look a little bit differently,
Right.
it's that isn't inherently a bad thing. It's just
No,
about making sure that, excuse me, it's just about making sure that the thought doesn't lead you down the path back to diet culture.
I think so. That's what I, yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I feel about it. Like Yeah. I mean, it's just there, everything's so deeply rooted into us. So I don't think
Yeah.
anyone listening to this should like think that they're going to wake up tomorrow and they're gonna be like, how do I want to feel? And all of a sudden they're like,
Right.
oh, okay, I like want to work out today, or like, or because some of the things we have to release are the diet culture ideas of like 10,000 steps a day. Do you know the story about 10,000 steps?
No, tell me.
So 10,000 steps is a marketing thing. It's like, it has nothing to do with health. And it had to do with like a Japanese company. I think they made a pedometer, and the character that for 10,000 looks like a person walking. And so they picked 10,000 steps. Now there's nothing wrong with getting in 10,000 steps a day, but it's not like actually based on like research and health, and like everyone's body is different. So the idea that like we should all get 10,000 steps a day and then that equals health is like absurd.
That is, I literally just had this conversation today with some friends about how much we walked this
Yeah.
past weekend, because I said, "Oh, I walked a ton because the L train was down, so I had to
Yeah.
walk to the gym," you know. And
Yeah.
I was saying I amassed like 15,000 steps per
Yeah.
day, and someone goes, "Yeah, you should be getting like 10,000 steps a day," and I go, "Yeah, I know." I always feel like a piece of shit when I don't. It's
Exactly.
rooted in nothing.
Yep, yep. And again, like deeply rooted in me. Like I still look at my phone sometimes and I'm like, how many steps did I get in
Oh
today?
yeah.
Just that like if you don't hit 10,000, you shouldn't feel like a piece of crap because it wasn't actually
Right.
like it has nothing to do with anything. Like if you got in 6,000 steps and like that's good for you, then like great.
Yeah.
That's good for you. One other thing though too is like the idea of working out for an hour. Like
Yeah.
then we feel like I didn't get in an hour. So there's like two different thoughts. It's right. I don't have an hour, so I won't work out, which is like, that's not productive. It would be so much better if you did the 20 minutes because you had 20 minutes. Or it's like, I went to the gym, I only did 45. Now I feel like it was not worth anything because I
Didn't
didn't work out for
happen.
an hour. Like 1 hour means, I mean, like as a trainer, I do work with people for an hour, but you know what? I also started working with people for half hour and they love it. And so do I. It goes by so fast. And they're
Yep.
like, oh my God, I just did so much in a half hour. So it's like we have to like recognize what's been ingrained in us and like what's real and also what's realistic for ourselves and what works for ourselves. Like we are all different, and it's great. And if you work out for an hour, and it's also great if you worked out for a half hour. Like both things can be true.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love it. I really, really, really loved our conversation. Thank
Me
you
too.
so much, Rachel, for coming on and giving us, your expertise. And just, I really think the listeners, I got a lot out of this conversation. So I hope the listeners do too. I would love if you could let my listeners know where to find you, what you have going on.
For sure. I would love to share. So my company is called No Longer Dieting. So you can check me out at NoLongerDieting.com, No Longer Dieting on TikTok, or No Longer Dieting on Instagram. And currently, I'm in the middle of launching group coaching, which is my favorite. So if you've like heard this discussion and you are interested in learning more about group coaching, please DM me on Instagram or TikTok, or email me from my website, and we can talk about the details. And I'm happy to give any listener who wants to join group a discount. So you can mention this podcast.
Amazing. Okay, thank you so much. Guys, as always, all of the information for Rachel and No Longer Dieting will be in the description of the show, so please check that out. And until next week, I'll talk to you later. Bye.